Are you guys ready for the 5 greatest words in niche board game podcasting?
Never.
Okay. Then I will wait till you're ready.
He said never, so we're going to be here a while. Seems sort of Sisyphusian to wait on him, but we can go for it.
Welcome to Winning Hand, the podcast about Marvel Champions, one card at a time. I am your host, Boom Guy. I'm joined today by Keiko,
Hello.
Lazy Titan,
How's it going?
and a special returning guest, Mr. Meeson.
Hello.
Mr. Meeson, you were on one of the first episodes, if I remember. Maybe it's 4 or 5. I don't remember anymore, but it was a long time ago. Welcome back. We're glad that you returned to the show, and we're happy to discuss the card today that everyone already knows because it's in the title of the show. If you clicked on it, you know what it is. It's the 4-cost Justice Ally Daredevil. Now, before we get to that, we're going to go through our regular segments. We have an audience question we're going to answer, and I think it's going to be a good one this time. And we are going to go into what we've been playing recently. So, let's start with what we've been playing, and then we'll do the question. How do you guys feel about that?
Ooh, spicing it up. I like it.
Sounds
Mixing up
good.
the format.
But
So-
I'll get so lost.
To kick us off, why don't we start with our guest? Mr. Meeson, why don't you tell us what you've been playing recently?
So yeah, I played recently with my local play group a couple weeks ago. We played a game of Juggernaut. We brought it was Cable Justice, Venom Justice, Hawkeye Leadership, that was me, and Phoenix Aggression. And we just had a really solid game that we played against Juggernaut. We won. And it was super helpful having Venom's ability to generate that wild resource to help fund being able to flip Juggernaut's helmet almost every turn when we needed it. And then when we were able to flip it, Hawkeye's ability to play his Sonic Arrow or his Electric Arrow, I think is the stunning one, and just to be able to help control his activations to either keep the helmet off or shut down possibilities for him to attack. So I felt a little nervous a few times playing Hawkeye against Juggernaut,
Yeah.
because Hawkeye is just a little squishy.
Yeah. Juggernaut, he's cool. I like Juggernaut a lot, but that sounds like a pretty epic Juggernaut game. I've also tried to beat him without flipping the helmet. Like, flipping the helmet obviously is a key part of that, but if you can do it without that, that's kind of cool too. I did it once, but it's hard to do.
I tried to do it once, and when Juggernaut was hitting 8 attack, I decided
Enough of that.
Can't do this.
Uncle. Yeah. Keiko, have you played Juggernaut?
I have not. I've heard a lot of scary things about him, so I'm kind of a weenie to do it on my own. I'm still struggling against crossbones every now and then, So
Yeah.
I'll get there once I kind of feel out. Because again, I think I've established so far that Spider-Woman and even Hulk are like my 2 solid decks. Once I start branching out more, kind of building more on other heroes, maybe then I'll start branching onto more villains. Because that's part of my journey, is branching out to more heroes, more villains. So I'll get there eventually.
Well, why don't you tell us what you've been playing recently, Keiko?
So part of that journey is I've finally gotten around to Domino. It's been a while since she's been out, which is funny because I've been wanting to play her since her announcement, but I just never got around to her. But I finally did, and she's got a lot of potential. My thing is also I've established on here is that I've got kind of a monkey brain. I just like to take hits and deal it back. There's not a lot of thought I want to put into it. Kind of fries my brain a bit. And her deck kind of unfortunately does that a little.
Yeah, Domino's a lot.
Yeah, it's just a lot to keep track of and all. But
So much.
I really want to have fun with it, so I'll keep playing with it. I only played with her pre-con so far. She's Justice built, and I don't think it's really utilized well. The Justice aspect, I didn't do a lot of thwarting with her. Maybe it was just my luck of my unluck of the draw, ironically, with Domino. But I was kind of struggling with side schemes and all of that. I just really couldn't make a dent. But her whole thing seems like it's centered around her identity cards. So I think I'm going to start trying to build a deck that really focuses on that. Because I was dealing a lot of damage, even in just a Justice aspect, particularly with her a good workout card.
Yeah.
Deals 4 damage base, but you also discard the top card of your deck, and it deals 1 additional damage for each resource.
Yeah.
And her ability is that wild resources count twice, so everything just kind of stacked up. That's her whole thing, is discarding the top cards of her deck. So it's a lot of swapping out and putting this in your hand, and so I think I just need to work on that a bit, see if I can really utilize her identity cards more. And I don't think Justice is for her. I should utilize her defense. She's got a base stat of 3.
Plus, she has her card that boosts it too.
Right. Yep. Which I haven't gotten to in my playthrough. So just a little more. She seems fun. I just need to work on her more.
She's pretty fun. I've only played her maybe like once or twice. I just haven't gotten a lot of domino plays in.
I played her through that campaign.
Yeah. I kind of want to
really
build
good.
like a deck like I built with Nova when he first came out, and just put every card I can think of that has a wild resource in, and just try to double constantly. I've seen a lot of domino decks. I've not seen that deck.
Most domino decks I see have a lot of wild resources because they usually run a lot of resource cards. Domino decks, I feel like, run commonly like 6 to 8 resource cards, and a lot of those are wilds. So you end up hitting wilds most of the time anyway.
Yeah, well, her entire identity stack is all wild resource,
which is super nice. And it means that her cards, you basically always get 2 off the top card when you discard, which is very solid.
Part of her whole thing of losing track and keeping track, you mentioned it earlier, was her Digging Deep card. I have to have it in front of me because I forget, but so her Digging Deep card, so after this card is discarded from the top of your deck, add it to your hand, which on its own doesn't sound like a lot to keep track of, but other cards speak about.
And that's not even a domino card.
Top of the card,
I'm excited for more of the discard archetype to come into the game.
It's so fun.
Lazy Titan, why don't you go next? What have you been playing recently?
So recently, I've been playing, as any good aggression player with a huge ego should, my own deck. So I've been playing one of the decks I created for the podcast, which is Wolverine Aggression. I originally thought Wolverine was like Drax 2.0, but he doesn't really work like that. And so I figured I'd try him out in some other aspects. Aggression was obviously my first go. The basic idea was it's a minion collector deck, but you don't prevent any damage. So you just stack a bunch of minions in front of you and then just take damage anyway. So you can draw cards off Berserker Frenzy. It plays a lot of allies, which I don't traditionally do, but you can't survive 4 minions hitting you and the villain hitting you every turn, even with all the healing you have. So it's good to have. And then I threw Symbiote Suit in there just so you can make sure you don't die, because it gets dangerous.
Best card in the game.
You're drawing cards off Berserker Frenzy, and then you draw into a Bring It, and you can play Bring It and draw more cards, and then you can just play all kinds of crazy stuff with Wolverine's Claws and your resource generators, and it's good. It was very powerful. I played it against Kang, I think, and there's some nasty minions in that one, but it was working for me.
All right, so now we have a question from the community. Are you guys ready?
I'm so ready. Couldn't be
Okay.
more ready.
As usual, as is becoming my thing, I never write down who sends these in. If you hear your question, that counts as your shout out, and you're welcome.
You're welcome.
Yell at Boomer.
Yell at me if you don't like it. All right, so there's recently been some discussion, and we got a question about this, so I wanted to kind of put it out there, about deck size. And the question asked us, are we very particular about only putting in 40 cards, or do we go above 40 cards? Because as the rules are written, right, you can have between 40 and 50 cards. That's your kind of limit. That's your range. And they wanted to know if we stick to 40 or if we go above, and if we do go above, why? So I know there are some strong feelings about this. I read a thread on Reddit, and there was a discussion on Discord a few weeks ago that I was watching and participated in a little bit. So I know there are some 40 card truthers out there who really feel strongly, but I want to know how you guys feel. Keiko, why don't you start us off this time?
Yeah, this is an
How do you feel
interesting
about it?
question. Well, I think it's well known. at this point that I don't follow the 40 card rule. Not as a sort of rebelling act. I know the argument for 40 cards or just generally lower amount is to cycle through the cards that you want or need to use as much as possible. But my thing is, there are just so many cards that I want in general that I just want them in my deck in general. And my kind of justification to myself is I have a lot of supports or upgrades, as high cost as they are, but once they're out on the table, then I have my, I guess, quote-unquote 40 card deck to kind of go through after that. But generally, that's kind of just my thing. I just, instead of wanting to cycle through cards faster or quicker, I just want more cards in general that I just want in my hand, or in my deck, rather.
Mr. Meeson, how do you feel about deck size?
It varies hero to hero for me. If it's a hero that has built-in draw power already, then it's not uncommon for me to have 45 to 50 cards. If it's a hero with a lower hand size and doesn't have as good draw capability, I tend to keep it towards 40.
Yeah. Lazy Titan, what do you think?
See, I have a bit more of a hard and fast stance with this. I would say that it is objectively more powerful to have a smaller deck size.
Yes.
Having a 40 card deck is objectively the right answer if you want to have the most powerful deck.
It's just better.
It is just better. It's strictly better. But sometimes you want to have 45 cards. Who cares? Sometimes you want to have a little fun. I'm not here to stop anybody, and I do it sometimes. Sometimes you're looking at your deck list of 42, 44, and you just can't possibly think what you would cut, and that's tricky.
And with that, I will transition us to the card of the day. Mr. Meeson, you are the guest in this episode, and you brought along a card today. Everyone already knows what it is because it's in the name of the episode, but would you mind reading the card for us so we can talk about it?
It is Daredevil, also known as Matt Murdock. He is a 4-cost Justice ally with 2 thwart, 2 attack, takes a consequential damage for each of those. He's got 3 hit points. He is a defender, and his response is after Daredevil thwarts, deal 1 damage to an enemy. And if you need to chuck him for a resource, he generates a physical resource.
So, the Daredevil, the Justice ally, he is a core set ally. So he came at the beginning of the game.
Yeah, he's in the Spider-Man precon.
He is. And so usually we always start by talking about the art. And so before I hand it to our resident art expert, I will just say that this is art from a comic. This is from Superior Iron Man Volume 1, Number 2 from 2014. Keiko, kick us off with the art here.
I very much love the composition of this. I think it's a very solid stance that he's in. It's very clear. It's very solid. I love the shadows on him. It really just shows that he works in the dark, no pun intended because he's blind, but he's going through the rooftops. He's a street hero. And this really just kind of embodies that. It's just really cool. The color scheme, he's all red, but they got the pure black on him.
Yeah.
There's no gradient or a darker tone of red. It's just pure black, and I personally love that in art styles. So it's really cool to see that here. Plus, the background is very detailed. I know it's taken from a panel, but we don't really see a ton of that. So it's really cool to see it here.
I really like the pose as well, and he's got his little rope swinging thing out of his clubs kind of around him in the air. He looks a little unshaven, kind of ragged, like he's a little rough. And it's obviously dusk or night, and it's dark. I think the art's really good in this.
I like it quite a lot.
Yeah, I think the art's good. I think we all kind of agree it's solid art. It's not spectacular, but it's definitely good. I like it.
It's definitely Daredevil.
It's one of the more solid. Yeah, it really reads to Daredevil.
Yeah,
it's one of the more
Daredevil,
solid
sure.
arts that we've reviewed on the show so far.
Yeah, just good stuff.
All right. Well, then the next thing we go to is the theme. So we talk about art. Now we talk about the theme of the card. Does this feel like Daredevil? Does it make you feel like Daredevil to play it? Does it evoke Daredevil somehow? What do you guys think?
I don't know a whole lot about Daredevil, but aside from the art, which we already talked about, uh, you know, his thwarting and then damaging right after, like, because he's a kind of a brutal street fight, crime fighter, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And
He's
of
been
course,
known to punch a crook or two.
yeah, so here and there, and there's this whole play on since he lost one of his senses, all his other ones are heightened, so that kind of plays into his thwarting. But along the way, he's like punching bad guys as he's doing it, and that's from what I've seen. That's what this kind of embodies too. So
He's
yeah,
been known
I
to
think it's
slug a ne'er-do-well here and there.
yeah, and even his flavor text and his resource icon, like it all plays into him punchy.
I think I agree. Yeah, I don't think this is like the most exceptional theming of any card we've seen. I feel like we've seen cards that evoke the character more, but the dealing damage when thwarting is, Daredevil's not necessarily getting information just like by asking people. He's like beating up criminals. So I think that's what that reads to me. I think it works.
I agree. I think it hits the kind of the duality of him thwarting as like a lawyer, right? But also punching. So I think it kind of speaks to both sides of that.
Yeah, it's super simple, but also very thematic.
It works.
All right. Well, power of this card. What do you guys think about the power?
It's helpful in certain situations. I mean, 2 thwart is decent. 3 hit points
Only
is
one
decent.
consequential.
That's
Too.
only, that's good.
Yeah.
I would say that's pretty good. That's good.
I like using him most when there's a tough that needs to be pinged,
I was going to
so
say the
that
same
you're
thing.
not wasting a big attack on the villain somewhere. If you can clear 2 threat off of a scheme, maybe kill a side scheme, and then take a tough off of the villain. That's super helpful.
Yeah.
And then I think generally speaking, I mean, aside from his cost, which I'm sure we'll get to, but 2 thwart, 2 attack, 1 consequential on its own is pretty powerful for an ally.
And that's good.
Yeah, that is good.
Mhm.
And
3 hit points.
Yep, and with thwart, 2 thwart plus 1 attack, it's, I don't know, I think it's pretty powerful just reading that on its own.
Yeah, I think that's pretty good. Well, like you touched on, Keiko, we do have to include the cost in the power. And that's where this starts to stumble a little bit.
And that's the thing too, is I never see Daredevil in any in any game I've ever been a part of or seen. I've never seen, unless you're playing like a precon, Spider-Man's precon. I don't think I've ever seen Daredevil.
I think
he doesn't get played a ton.
this feels like a core set card to me. Nowadays, I think allies have exploded and cheaper allies have kind of proliferated throughout the game. 2-cost allies, we've talked about many times in this game, are always good because 2 costs, you're going to get some kind of activation, maybe an effect when they enter the game, and then you're also going to chump block. That's just a lot of value. And the value doesn't really scale up to 4 cost, right? So if I get a 2-cost ally, who's a good 2-cost? Like Arrows,
Maria
for
Hill.
example, is a good Justice 2-cost. He comes in for 2 cost. He has 2 thwart, 1 attack, and I think he confuses a minion for each
science
mental
resource you
resource
spent.
you use,
Yeah.
which is honestly secondary because he costs 2, he can thwart for 2, and then eat an attack.
But you can
And that's super
confuse 2
valuable.
minions by accident.
He
Like,
could, yeah, and you
it's
could.
great.
But to me, that's a secondary
Very
aspect
secondary,
of that
but
card.
it's still very powerful.
But my point is that like to spend the 2 additional resources to play Daredevil, it's difficult to justify that. Like if I have a handful of cards and I have both of those in my hand, I'm probably going to play Arrows and then try to play something else with my other cards. It's difficult to justify 4. And I think when the game first came out in the core set, I played Daredevil not a lot because I don't play a ton of Justice, but he did get played regularly because he's a good ally and there weren't that many good allies. But now I think he could cost 3.
Maybe if it was
honest.
like cost 3, maybe just 2 hit points, like that would scale enough.
I don't know.
Yeah, 4
I-
is nobody's
I
playing
think
that
he could
anymore.
cost 3 and still be not overpowered.
And,
He'd be
then, yeah,
fine.
and just leave the rest.
I think. What do you guys think?
I think, and now I might be wrong here, but I'm gonna come out of the gate, and I think that we are spoiled. Is what I think we are. because
Explain yourself, sir.
This is the exact kind of card which is like where I look at it, and as a privileged Marvel Champions player, I throw up in my mouth at the thought of playing 4 for anything other than symbiote suit. So I'm like, wow, disgusting. I would never. But if you like just step back from your ego and play Daredevil, he's good.
Yeah, he's really good.
He's just a good card. And like, yeah, he's not like the most hyper efficient card, but like he's just good. You just pay 4, you get a block, 4 thwart, and 2 damage, because you're probably just gonna thwart twice. Like that's good value. And I think for me, I look at it, I'm like, that's terrible, because it's not play arrows, thwart for 2, play another card, deal 10 damage, play another card, thwart for 7, win. Like, I think it's like that's why this card was good in the core set, because it's good, but just we didn't have like better options. So now this card is not the best option, but it's still like is a good card. And if you play it, you won't be like really upset about it. Like if you play Dum Dum Dugan, you're gonna be sad. If you play this card, you're going to be like, well, this was a fine decision. I don't regret this.
Do not sully the good name of Dum Dum Dugan. That is
no
for a
good name
future
to
episode. So
I was going to say.
My man is trash.
That is a future episode. Don't spoil it.
2
No.
Ds, not
When
3.
I said that this felt like a core set card, Mr. Mason, you were nodding your head in agreement. Do you? What do you think about this?
I think I don't think he's aged well. Just with how the game has changed, like he's still a good ally, but like you guys were saying, when you compare him to the other cheaper ally options, it's really hard to justify him still in the ally slot.
Mm-hmm. For sure.
So I feel like in the early game, the very early life of the game, he was almost in every Justice deck I
there weren't
built.
that many allies in Justice.
There weren't many options.
Yeah.
There are just better options at every turn, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like when he's on the table, I'm happy because he's thwarting for 2 and dealing some damage, and that's great. But I don't want to pay 4 for that. If I'm going to pay 4 for an ally, I want a better ally. I want
Beast.
I want Beast, or I want Nick Fury, or I want just another
I want something
ally.
that gives me my money back. Is basically
I want
what we're
something
saying.
that's just better, basically.
I want something that
I want
pays me back.
Colossus. I don't know. There's better expensive allies, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's tough. Then you think, okay, well, what if we cheat him in with that new player side scheme, whatever it's called, that pulls in an
Call for
ally?
backup.
Call for aid.
Call for backup. Okay.
Call for aid.
Well,
is
what
the
if I use that to
Avengers
bring him
one?
in? Well, then if I'm going to cheat in an expensive ally, I still would rather have a different expensive ally.
I'd rather get like Pete Wisdom.
Pete Wisdom, or again,
Hope
Beast,
Summers.
or Nick Fury. Like, there's just so I just don't know where it fits anymore. And I'm with you, Mr. Meeson. When the game first was early on in the Justice decks, there were so few allies. He was in there, and as Lazy Titan said, he's not a bad card. But paying 4 for things at this point in the game doesn't feel great.
Bad.
And I think another thing too, as a newbie, I'm noticing he's only traded Defender, which, as far as I know, doesn't speak to anything, especially
It's
compared
nothing.
to other ally traits, which do speak to other, like Guardians or Web
He's not
Warriors,
Shield.
or
He's not an Avenger.
like Defenders,
Which
is basically
hurts
just
him
an
now.
empty.
It might matter
Trait.
later.
Yep.
We'll see.
We talked about the power. Let's talk about the fun of this card. When you have Daredevil in your hand, and we talked a little bit about this already, how fun is it to play it onto the table?
I think that leans into the power.
I mean, these two always kind of lean in a little
They
bit,
lean
but
in a
there's
little
some
bit.
difference.
But there is definitely some difference. But I think that this card is hurt by the same thing that hurts the power, which is the 4 cost. Because a 4 cost is almost always your entire turn. Unless
Yes.
you're playing Domino or Ironheart, kind of.
Or SPDR.
Or SPDR. That's really your turn. That's it. You're done. 4 like burning your turn for something like an Avengers Mansion doesn't feel amazing. But if you get it early, you know that later turns you're going to have an extra card in your hand forever, and that's real value. 4 cost for something like a symbiote suit doesn't really feel bad because you get that 10 hit points, you get the hand size. It's like Avengers Mansion with upside. Like there's so much value stapled onto that. And 4 cost for like something like Nick Fury or Beast that gets you your money back right away that you can then use that same turn feels better. but this is just 4 cost for 2 thwart and a damage. And then your basic
feel better
ability.
about Colossus because at least I get 2 blocks out of it, right? With that tough card and then another one. It's just, it doesn't feel super fun. Like when I have it in my hand, I would rather play Eros if he's in my hand. Like those are my choices.
What's the new one? Who draws you a card when he attacks confused enemies?
Cypher?
Cypher. That's a good one. Wiccan.
Yeah. There's a lot of good Justice allies now, or better Justice allies. So
Vivian,
it's hard
the
for me
basic
to-
ally. She's great.
Yeah, she's great. It's hard for me to include this one. I'll be honest.
It's hard. And I will say he's in the deck for this episode, the deck that I built, but only because he's the card of the episode.
Well, yeah. So we should also mention, if anyone's new to the show, Lazy Titan is our resident deckspert, as we call
That's
him.
me.
And he builds a deck every episode using the card of the episode. So if you're ever looking for a deck using that card, or you're not sure how you would use it, you can always see an example from Lazy Titan. It's linked in the show notes below. Check it out. You can click on his name on Marvel CDB and see his other published deck lists. He's got a whole series. So every single episode has a
A
deck.
whole list of them. And this
Go
one
back through.
includes Daredevil, obviously.
Yeah.
I think it's a War Machine. It's a War Machine
Yeah, it is.
float like a butterfly deck is what I built for this. And I put Daredevil in here because he's the card of the episode. He's not critical to the deck.
Keiko, fun. Tell me how fun this card is. And then, Mr. Meeson, you need to defend the funness of this card because you're the one who brought this. I hope you didn't bring a
You
stinker.
brought this garbage to my podcast.
Keiko,
Now you
how
gotta
fun
defend
is this
it.
card?
That's the thing is, as always in these episodes, it always goes back and forth as I hear the different perspectives. But this one's kind of just fighting to break average. Like everybody was saying, it worked for the time. All in all, like if it's out there, it works. It does its job, but it normally doesn't make the final cut nowadays. And I really like what Titan, the term that Titan used, getting your money back. And yeah, I could see Daredevil just kind of, you get what you pay for, but you don't get that money back in a way. So it's kind of average to me in that sense. Maybe slightly above, maybe like 5.5.
Mr. Meeson.
I brought
How
this
fun.
card because I was feeling nostalgic. I don't necessarily think it's a great card anymore where the game is at. At the time I suggested this as a card, I was actually going back and playing using just core set and wave 1 hero packs and cards from those packs. And like we were saying, in that day, he was an auto include because you didn't have many options. But he also helped your board state for the most part.
Yeah.
With his higher thwart than average for allies and the ability to ping toughs. As far as fun goes, today, he's one I don't play that often anymore. If I include Daredevil in a deck, it's mostly because I'm going out of my way in wanting to include it, knowing that there are better options out there. And whether or not he actually hits the table, if I have a hand of cards and it's just right, I'll play Daredevil over something else. But in many other cases, I would rather play, my hero-specific upgrade or support that I have, and then play this event that gets a benefit from this upgrade that I just put on the table.
I think if I'm playing him in a deck and he's in my hand and I have a Power of Justice in my hand, it's very likely he's going to get played. Let alone if I have 2 in my hand, right? Because then I feel like I'm getting value for those cards. Other than that, I don't know. There is another Daredevil ally card in the game, a protection one, which I very much don't understand. That card. I think I play that one even less than I played this one.
It's
That's
2
for another
cost, though.
episode. It's 2 cost, but
So it's worth playing.
ability I don't understand.
It's to block
I
minions.
forgot that ally even existed
Yeah. It's not great, but it's
until
meant to
you
block
had
minions.
mentioned it after I suggested
Yeah. You said, "Oh, my
Daredevil without specifying Justice Daredevil.
Yeah. Immediately, that's the one that came to my mind. I don't know why. And I thought, oh, that card it's kind of a dud, Mr. Meeson. Maybe we can think of a better one.
Yeah.
And then, so the green one I don't think is great. But
I think it's better.
if this card costs 3, I think it would still make it into some of my decks, Justice decks. As it
for
is,
sure.
I feel like it has not aged well, and it's kind of sliding out for me. It's not a
possible.
really viable card anymore.
It's possible that changes. Like Keiko said, if the typing ever matters, he could get a serious buff. If we get like an Uncanny X-Men for the defenders,
Sure.
when the Luke Cage hero pack comes out or whatever, maybe
Sure.
he'll get a second wind. But until then, we're kind of stuck with him.
Yeah.
I think the biggest thing that hurts him now, I mean, obviously, aside from the 4 cost, is just no traits. He's basically got a blank trait.
Yeah, he's got a blank text box.
Yeah, Defender does
trait
nothing.
box. Defender's nothing. And there's nothing that cares about different traits. There's nothing that cares about like
There's so
unique
many
traits.
So many supports and upgrades now that speak to other traits, but nothing for this one. So
That hurts
All right,
it as well.
then it's final thoughts time. And I'm going to give Mr. Mason the final word because he brought the card. I'll go first. For me, I'm going to rate this as appropriately 4 out of 10. I think it is held back by the high cost. As we talked about, the keyword doesn't do anything for it. The 2 thwart and 2 attack is good, and dealing a damage after you thwart is good. But for me, it's not good enough to overcome the cost, and there just are better allies now. I wish it was better than it is because Daredevil's cool, but it's not one I really put in decks anymore unless I'm going for a thematic deck, which there's really no reason to with the Defenders because there's no trait cards for them. So for me,
they're not
4
real.
out of 10, and that it might slide down even more over time. Lazy Titan?
Well, here's the thing. I don't like allies to start with, and 4-cost allies feel like pulling teeth most of the time. But I recently played the Spider-Man precon from the core set because a friend of mine got into the game, and I played the Spider-Man precon to teach them. At the time, if you play with only the core set cards, this is an all-star because man, those cards are bad. There's really not that many cards, and so I see the nostalgia. I see what I want Daredevil to be. I understand how it was back in the day when all we had was Daredevil, but that's not the world we live in anymore. We live in a post Daredevil world. Like if I'm paying 4 cost for a 3 health 2/2 ally who does 2 damage, I'm just gonna play Nick Fury, and I'm not gonna do the 2 damage. It's just not good enough anymore. So I think I will give it a 3. I'll dock it an extra point because I also don't like allies to start with, and this feels painful to play.
Before I hand it to Keiko for his final thoughts, I will just say this is why when I tell new players about this game, or people post about just joining the game, I encourage them to not jump to the end and buy the newest stuff. I encourage them to go through the game as it was released. Yes, the model of releasing hero packs is such that you don't have to follow it like you did with Arkham and you did with Lord of the Rings. You can buy things out of order. If you don't like Miss Marvel and Cap were the first 2 heroes, then don't buy them. You can skip right to Cyclops and whoever else. But what I think it's lost in there is that you lose a third of the cards of the game that you will never play because you'll jump straight to Next Evolution, or whatever the newest expansion is when you join, and then you'll open this card and say, why the hell would I play a 4-cost Daredevil? This card is bad. Why did they ever
Why would I
make
play
this
Warning?
card?
Why would I play Beat 'em Up? Invulnerability.
Exactly. Tac team. There's a bunch of cards, right, that we can name. So I always encourage people, play through it in order. If you want to skip something you don't care about, sure. But get the boxes in order. Play through the core set for a while before you go on to the next stuff because you're just going to... I'm glad I did it that way because I had to, because I joined when the game started. Because then I did play Daredevil, and I do have some nostalgia, like Mr. Mason said. So if you're new to the game, please, I would encourage you, go through it in order, at least loosely. Anyway, Keiko, final thoughts on Daredevil.
So I kind of mentioned it before. He's kind of hovering around average, and I think I'm going to stick with that because for 4 costs, he does a lot, I think, or he does enough rather. He does what his cost is. You get 4 thwart, 2 damage, and a defense potentially, but you don't get anything more than that really. If I'm going to include art, as part of that, it won't add a whole lot, but a slightly above average. I'll stick with like 5.5, 5.5. I think I'll stick with that. If he had more traits or some useful trait, I think then he'd be higher up. But he's got a blank trait. That's ultimately what I think hurts him the most.
Mr. Meeson, final thoughts on Daredevil?
I'm going to cheat and give 2 numbers. The first number.
That's not how final thoughts work.
Final
Go ahead, do what you want.
Cheater.
First number is based on the nostalgia factor, and just because I had a more fresh experience playing with just first wave content, and I would put him at a 7 in just that context. Today, where the card is at now, I'd probably put him at a 4.
If we were doing this episode in the spring of 2020, when all we had was a core set, I'm with you. I'd say this is a 7 or 8. Daredevil's great.
Yeah, it's an exceptional card.
But the game has evolved, and he will just continue to slide, I think,
Yeah.
as it goes on.
And not all cards from the core set have aged poorly. There are some cards that still really hold up today.
Maria Hill, anyone?
Nick
Maria
Fury.
Hill, I think Helicarrier still holds up.
Oh, yeah.
I feel like Avengers Mansion has slid a bit compared to Helicarrier, and Daredevil has just slid more.
Yeah. It's too bad. It's a cool character and a character that everybody likes. But before we wrap up today, we have one more bit of news that we want to share with you. And we think this is going to make someone's Christmas extra nice. Mr. Meeson, why don't you tell everybody what I'm talking about?
I have some alternate art cards from the Mutant Genesis organized play kit. So I've got Colossus, Shadowcat, Cyclops, Phoenix, Wolverine, Storm, Gambit, and Rogue. I've got both the full art cards that are of the original hero cards, and I have the alternate art cards, so the alternate comic book art cards.
Okay.
For these cards. So that's a full set of 16 alternate art cards that one lucky listener could win. I think what we're going to do is, in order for you to be entered in, we're going to have you build a deck around one of the X-Men using the card that we are going to discuss when we announce the winner of this contest, and that card is Repurpose.
Ooh, Repurpose. Okay. Yeah. As Mr. Meeson said, Repurpose is the next card that we're going to talk about in the next episode. That episode will come out the day after Christmas, the 26th of December, for those who don't know what Christmas is. Anyway, if you want to win, I will put a link to a Google form in the show notes. You need to submit that along with a link to it'll have the questions. You answer the questions, how to get in touch with you, whatever. And it'll tell you to add a link in there. So you need to add a link to your Marvel CDB deck that is your repurposed build for one of the 8 X-Men heroes from the Mutant Genesis wave. And then we will pick a winner and announce it in the next episode.
Real quick regarding Marvel CDB, I don't know about you guys, but sometimes I have trouble sharing links. I think there's a setting you need to set in your profile where you can make unpublished decks visible.
Yes.
It still means that it doesn't mean that anyone and everyone can comment on them, but if you share a link with someone, they'll be able to see it, which is the only way we're going to be able to see these decks that you put together.
Yeah. So that's a great call. Just make sure you have your settings right. Try it out. If you have any questions, you can reach out to me. I'll let you know if it worked or didn't work. winninghandpodcast@gmail.com, or you can hit me on Discord, whatever. Everything is in the show notes for how to get in touch with us. So build your repurpose deck. submit it to us, and then we will pick a winner and announce it on the next episode and send out your promos to you that were brought to the show by Mr. Meeson. So thank you. That's an awesome giveaway.
Yeah, thank you.
And we look forward to making someone's Christmas a little more mutanty. Xmas, some people might say. No, so thanks for listening, everybody. If you listened this far, please take a minute, leave a written review, leave 5 stars if you liked it. That really does mean a lot. It helps us climb the podcast ladder and get the show into more people's headphones. If you like it, send the link to someone if they would enjoy it as well. We are always happy when people share it. Thanks to Keiko, Lazy Titan, and Mr. Meeson for joining me today, and we will see you all on the next episode when we reveal the winner of the promo. Thanks for listening, and goodbye, everybody.
See ya.
I love you.
See ya.
Awesome.